Paris, 1936. While Europe teetered on the edge of war, Nancy Wake was living a life most people only dreamed about. Champagne parties at the Ritz, designer gowns, a wealthy French industrialist husband. To anyone watching, she was just another beautiful socialite with nothing more serious on her mind than the next cocktail party. The Gestapo would later call her the most dangerous woman in Europe. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake was born in New Zealand in 1912, but she grew up in Australia with a fire in her belly that proper society couldn't contain. At 16, she ran away from home. By her early 20s, she'd worked her way to Paris as a freelance journalist, and that's where her real life began. In 1937, she married Henri Fiocca, a wealthy French industrialist. Suddenly, Nancy had everything: money, status, a stunning apartment overlooking Paris. She threw parties. She wore Chanel. She drank champagne like water. To the outside world, Nancy Wake was the definition of a woman who had it all and wanted nothing more. But Nancy had seen something that changed her forever. During her time as a journalist, she traveled to Vienna in 1933. She witnessed Nazi brown shirts beating Jewish men and women in the streets. She saw elderly people forced to scrub pavements with toothbrushes while crowds laughed. The images burned into her mind. She made herself a promise that day. If fascism ever came for France, she would fight back. Most people forgot about Nancy Wake, the party girl, after France fell in 1940. They assumed she'd fled to safety with her money and connections. They couldn't have been more wrong. When German forces occupied France in June 1940, Nancy didn't run. While her husband Henri begged her to escape to safety, she began working with the French resistance almost immediately. Her cover was perfect. Who would suspect a glamorous socialite of running weapons and intelligence? She started as a courier, using her beauty and charm to move through German checkpoints without suspicion. German officers would tip their caps to her, smile at her, let her pass without searching her bags. They had no idea she was carrying forged documents, money for resistance cells, and intelligence that would lead to German deaths. For nearly 3 years, Nancy operated in plain sight. She helped hundreds of Allied prisoners and downed pilots escape France through an underground network. She moved between resistance groups, coordinating operations, delivering messages that couldn't be trusted to any other method. But the Gestapo wasn't stupid. They knew someone was operating in the region, someone clever, someone who kept slipping through their fingers like water. They gave this phantom operative a code name: the White Mouse. By 1943, Nancy Wake was the Gestapo's most wanted person in France. The bounty on her head reached 5 million francs. That's equivalent to over $1 million today. The Nazis wanted her more than any other Allied agent in France. In 1943, the net was closing. The Gestapo had raided her home 4 times. They'd arrested her husband, Henri, though they had no proof he was involved. Nancy knew if she stayed, she'd be captured, tortured, and executed. Worse, she'd compromised dozens of resistance fighters. She made the hardest decision of her life. She would escape to Spain, then to Britain. The journey nearly killed her. She had to cross the Pyrenees Mountains on foot in the dead of winter. German patrols were everywhere. On her first attempt, she was caught and imprisoned by the Spanish. She managed to convince them she was just a refugee, and they released her. On her second attempt, she made it through, half-starved and frostbitten. She arrived in Britain in 1943, expecting to rest and coordinate resistance operations from London. Instead, she volunteered for something far more dangerous. The Special Operations Executive, Britain's secret army of saboteurs and spies, was recruiting agents to parachute back into France. The mission was almost suicidal: drop behind enemy lines, organize resistance fighters, and cause absolute chaos for the Germans before D-Day. Nancy trained in everything: hand-to-hand combat, weapons, sabotage, radio operation, silent killing. The instructors were impressed. This woman, who'd been dismissed as a party girl, could march further, shoot straighter, and fight harder than most of the men in her class. In February 1944, Nancy Wake parachuted back into occupied France. Nancy landed in the Auvergne region of central France, one of the most dangerous zones in the country. The area was crawling with German troops and the brutal Gestapo units hunting resistance fighters. Her mission was clear but almost impossible. Link up with scattered Maquis resistance groups, organize them into an effective fighting force, and coordinate attacks on German infrastructure before the Allied invasion. When she arrived, she found roughly 7,000 resistance fighters scattered across the region. But they weren't an army. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and students with a handful of weapons and almost no military training. Many of the groups refused to work together. Some were communists. Some were nationalists. They fought amongst themselves as much as they fought the Germans. Nancy had to unite them. She was 32 years old, a woman, a foreigner in some of their eyes. Many of the Maquis leaders didn't want to take orders from her. Some openly mocked her. They called her the little lady from London. They assumed she'd be dead within a week. Nancy proved them wrong through sheer force of will and competence. Nancy didn't lead from behind a desk. She led from the front. She organized weapons drops, coordinating with London for parachute deliveries of guns, ammunition, and explosives. She rode her bicycle over 500 kilometers in 72 hours through German-held territory to find a radio operator after theirs was killed. That's over 300 miles on a bicycle, through mountain roads with German patrols everywhere. When she arrived, she sent her messages, then cycled back. The Maquis fighters stopped mocking her after that. She taught them tactics, how to set ambushes, how to attack and disappear before German reinforcements arrived, how to sabotage railways and bridges without getting caught. Under her leadership, the resistance groups transformed from scattered bands into a coordinated guerrilla force. But Nancy didn't just plan operations, she fought in them. It was April 1944, just weeks before D-Day. Nancy was leading a raid on a German garrison. The plan was to hit fast, kill as many Germans as possible, and disappear into the night before reinforcements arrived. The raid was going perfectly. Her Maquis fighters hit the garrison hard. Germans were falling. Chaos everywhere. Victory was seconds away. Then Nancy saw him. An SS sentry, separate from the main fighting, had spotted them. He was reaching for his whistle. If he blew it, nearby German units would hear. They'd be surrounded, cut off, slaughtered. Nancy was the closest person to him. She ran at him before he could sound the alarm. He was bigger than her, stronger, trained. But Nancy had learned something in her SOE training that most people never truly understand. In a life-or-death fight, hesitation gets you killed. She didn't hesitate. She got behind him, wrapped her arm around his throat, and killed him with her bare hands. The SS guard collapsed, dead, silent. The raid continued. Her fighters escaped. Nobody died that night except Germans. When the other Maquis fighters found out what she'd done, the mockery stopped forever. The party girl from London had just killed an SS guard in hand-to-hand combat to save their lives. From that moment on, they would have followed Nancy Wake into hell itself. Between April and August 1944, Nancy Wake's Maquis forces became a nightmare for the Germans. They destroyed bridges, derailed trains, ambushed convoys, killed collaborators. Under Nancy's leadership, they inflicted over 1,400 German casualties. They tied down thousands of German troops who should have been fighting the Allied invasion. The Germans sent entire divisions to hunt them down. Nancy's forces fought running battles against superior numbers, and won. When the Germans burned villages in retaliation, Nancy's fighters hit back harder. In one battle, Nancy and 500 Maquis fighters held off 22,000 German troops for 4 hours. They inflicted heavy casualties before melting back into the countryside. The Germans never caught them. Nancy personally led attacks. She coordinated airdrops. She interrogated prisoners. She made strategic decisions that saved lives and won battles. The Americans later estimated that her Maquis forces had been as effective as 4 regular military divisions in disrupting German operations, all led by the woman the Nazis had dismissed as a party girl. France was liberated in August 1944. Nancy's Maquis fighters joined up with advancing Allied forces. The Germans retreated. The nightmare was over, but Nancy had lost everything. Her husband, Henri, arrested by the Gestapo in 1943, had been tortured for information about his wife. He never talked. He never betrayed her. The Gestapo executed him in October 1943. Nancy didn't find out until after the liberation. The man she'd loved, who'd supported her work with the resistance, who'd begged her to flee to safety while he stayed behind, was dead. Killed because he was married to the White Mouse. She never forgave herself. After the war, Nancy was one of the most decorated servicewomen in history. Britain gave her the George Medal. France awarded her the Croix de Guerre 3 times and made her a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. America gave her the Medal of Freedom. But the medals didn't bring Henri back. Nancy Wake lived until 2011. She died in London at the age of 98. For decades after the war, her story was barely known. SOE records remained classified. Nancy herself rarely talked about her experiences. When journalists asked about the war, she'd brush them off with jokes. "I killed a lot of Germans, and I am only sorry I didn't kill more," she once said with a smile. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that her full story began to emerge. Books were written, documentaries were made. Finally, the world learned about the party girl who became the Gestapo's most wanted person, who killed with her bare hands, who led 7,000 men into battle, and who helped liberate France. Today, Nancy Wake is remembered as one of the greatest Allied agents of World War II, a woman who was underestimated by everyone, who used that underestimation as a weapon, and who proved that courage has nothing to do with how you look or where you come from. The Nazis called her the White Mouse because she was impossible to catch. But she wasn't running away. She was hunting them. Nancy Wake's story reminds us that history's greatest heroes often come from the most unexpected places. The party girl nobody took seriously became the warrior everyone feared. If you want to join us on this mission to uncover forgotten stories from World War II, please subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories need to be told. These heroes deserve to be remembered. And finally, we have one question we always ask. Where are you watching from? Our community stretches across the entire globe, from the United States to the United Kingdom, from Canada to Australia, from India to the Philippines. You're not just a viewer. You're part of a community keeping these memories alive. Please drop a comment and let us know your city or country, and tell us if someone in your family served. Did your grandfather fight in Europe? Did your grandmother work in a factory building planes? These connections matter. These stories connect us all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering, and thank you for making sure that heroes like Nancy Wake are never forgotten. They dismissed her as a party girl. She became a legend.